She's a director with the new organization. She's going to introduce our next speaker.
The dog is appropriately excited and goes straight to our next speaker is Gerry Nicholls. Gerry has been fighting for freedom in Canada for a long time. He spent 22 years as head of the National Citizens Coalition. He's no longer head of the organization, and let's just say they won't be getting any more of my money. Gerry is now a columnist with some media. He also does occasional columns for other places. He's a senior fellow with the Democracy Institute, and he's been described as one of the top 5 political minds in the country. And by Matt, actually, and basically by us. So, good source. Anyways, we're very, very excited to have him here, so please join me in welcoming Gerry Nicholls.
Thanks very much, Janet. It's a pleasure for me to be here. This is my second Liberty Summer Seminar that I've spoken to. Last time I was here, it rained all day. So I'm glad that the weather's cooperating today, which is good for me. But unfortunately, better weather doesn't make me a better speaker, which is unfortunate for you. But anyway, so let's begin. As Janet said, I had a 22-year association with the National Citizens Coalition, which is Canada's largest organization for the defense of our economic and political freedoms. And that association came to an abrupt end in April of this year when I was terminated. And you might imagine that was a bit of a rough time, a dark day in my life. And the only reason I'm bringing that up is to let you know that a couple days after my firing, Peter Jaworski contacted me, and he managed to lift my spirits. And he lifted my spirits by doing 2 things. First of all, he introduced me to a marvelous an amazing new world that I never knew existed before. I'm talking about the world of Facebook. Thank you very much, Peter, for getting me even more addicted to the internet than I already was. And of course, I know I have many Facebook friends here in the audience today. I know people here who have poked me, or written on my wall, or even thrown sheep at me. And if you belong to Facebook, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't belong to Facebook, just join and become my friend, because I need as many Facebook friends as I can get. The second thing Peter did to lift my spirits was that he honored me by inviting me to speak at this year's Liberty Summer Seminar, or as I like to call it, Ayn Rand meets Survivor. And it is an honor for me to be speaking here, because I think that this is quickly becoming one of the most eagerly anticipated and popular events for those of us who cherish and love freedom. You know, and why not? I mean, why not? Where else can you meet so many people, you know, who share your ideals and love of freedom? Where else can you do it in such a beautiful, bucolic environment? Where else can you do it where you have a swimming pond, for heaven's sakes? I mean, this event even has its own theme song. I think Lindy wrote this theme song, which I can't get out of my head, by the way. I'm going to ask Lindy to write a theme song for me, I think. It's going to be called Gerry Nicholls, one of the top 5 political minds in the country. I think it would make a good rap song. Anyway, the real purpose for us to be here, of course, is to inspire us and to give us motivation to fight for freedom and to redouble our fight for freedom, to make Canada a freer and better place. And that's what I want to talk about this afternoon. I want to talk about fighting. I want to talk about combat. I want to talk about warfare. But in the political sense of those words. Political fighting, political combat, political warfare. Because politics is a lot like war. Well, actually, it's a lot like a street fight. Okay, it's dirty, it's low down, it can be a blood sport. But like it or not, that's the war that those of us who believe in freedom and who cherish freedom have to be part of. We have to be part of that fight. We have to engage in that fight. Because it's really a war of ideas. And we have to get out there and we have to sell our ideas and sell our values and sell our principles. If we don't do that, we'll lose. And we can't afford to lose. The stakes are too high. Okay? And I've had a lot of experience in fighting for freedom. As Janet said, more than 20 years. Which means I've been doing it for longer than some of you have even been alive. And I can't tell you how much that depresses me. But I have had a lot of experience. I mean, I've waged campaigns against high taxes and against government waste. I've taken on election gag laws and political greed. I've battled union bosses and bureaucrats and politicians of every size, shape, color, and creed. And one thing that was constant in all those battles was this. The National Citizens Coalition was always the underdog. Okay? Our enemies could always spend more than we could. They were bigger than we were. They had better access to the media than we did. Who were our enemies? Okay? Big union bosses, financed by forced union dues. You know, the hundreds and hundreds of left-wing special interest groups, most of them subsidized by big government. And of course, our biggest enemy of all, the state itself. And I don't think I have to tell anybody here how big and powerful and nasty the state can be. So in order to fight these kinds of fights for freedom, the NCC had to be smarter. We had to use our resources more carefully. We had to get a bigger bang for our buck. Okay? So I guess if go back to my warfare analogy, if politics is like a war, the NCC practiced guerrilla warfare. Okay? We would seek out vulnerable targets, attack quickly, then retreat back into the woods or the mountains, waiting for another vulnerable target to appear. And I've become an expert in this kind of guerrilla warfare fighting. You know, in fact, I like to consider myself the Che Guevara of the libertarian movement. Yay. That's why they gave me this T-shirt, a wonderful T-shirt. You know, unlike the real Che Guevara, I don't have T-shirts though. I don't have posters. I don't own a beret. Che Guevara probably had more hair than I do. And I'm not a communist. But other than that, I'm just like Che Guevara of the libertarian movement. And what I'd like to do today is share with you some of my ideas, some of my strategies, some of my tactics that makes for an effective guerrilla warfare campaign. Okay, I in fact have the top, where I call my top 10 guerrilla warfare strategy techniques. Unlike Karen, I actually believe in the metric system, and I have 10, not 9. Before I begin, though, let me just say that not everybody will agree with everything I'm going to say. Some of my ideas are controversial. You won't read about them in political science textbooks or hear them discussed in university lectures or mentioned in polite society. I mentioned that I consider myself the Che Guevara of the libertarian movement. Well, other people have less flattering labels for me. I've been called, I've been called a gutter fighter, a mudslinger, I've been called a hatchet man, and that's just from my mother. No matter what you call me, my ideas, my strategies do work, they are effective. So, let's begin. Point 1 on my top 10 guerrilla warfare strategy techniques. I've already alluded to it. Seek the weak. Okay? The military philosopher Sun Tzu advised generals to avoid the enemy where he is strong, attack the enemy where he is weak. Same principle applies to guerrilla warfare tactics in politics. Let's take, for example, the question of government spending, government waste. This was something the NCC was always concerned about, was government wasting tax dollars. Now, I suppose one of the things we could have done was gone after the big ticket items. Healthcare spending, social welfare spending, agricultural subsidies. But to do that would have been going against the government where it's strong. And they would have been easy arguments for the government or big government advocates to deflect. You know, healthcare. Oh, the NCC wants to shut down hospitals so sick people will die in agony. Or, you know, social welfare programs. Oh, the NCC wants to close down orphanages so children have to beg in the streets. Or, you know, you talk about agricultural subsidies. I didn't know you were against the family farm, right? Those are all hard arguments to fight. So the NCC went after government spending through guerrilla warfare tactics. Sought out a weak point. What we did was we did some research, and we got hundreds of examples of outrageous or ridiculous government spending. Things nobody would want to defend. Okay? Things like the government spent $8,000 in something called the Continuous Garbage Project. Or they spent $15,000 for something called the Institute for Social Studies. Or they spent $10,000 for a study called Deviance in the Modern Woman. Actually, that's probably a good one. I wouldn't be too much opposed to that one. Anyway, we took these examples of government waste, and we put them in a little book, what we called Tales from the Tax Trough. Okay? Had a picture of a cartoon pig on the cover, little cartoon illustrations inside to illustrate some of the waste we had. And we mailed out these things, like hundreds of thousands of these things. And this campaign was an amazing hit. It was a home run. I mean, the media loved it. Our little Tales booklet was in national news shows, you know, Global, CBC, CTV. It was on the front page of newspapers across the country. I had radio talk shows lined up around the block to talk to me about Tales from the Tax Trough. And the public liked it too. I mean, people would read these things. Yeah, they would laugh at some of the ridiculous examples, but it would also get them angry. It would get them motivated. It would get them calling their MPs and saying, why are you wasting my money on these kinds of things? But the real success of this campaign, I think, was this. It got people thinking about the bigger picture of government waste and government spending and how much taxes they were paying and how their money was being frittered away by politicians. So you attacked a weak point to make a bigger point. Okay, that's guerrilla warfare. And it's kind of a scattered approach, that one, but we also did more of a rifle shot approach when we went after MP pensions. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the MP pension plan, but it's super rich. It's far richer than anything anybody in the private sector could ever hope to afford. It pays out like $1 million, $2 million, $3 million in benefits. So we went after this campaign, this issue, with a media campaign. And one of the things we did, for instance, was we found out there were going to be 50 MPs qualifying for their pensions on a certain day. So we said, okay, this day is trough day. Okay, we went to Ottawa, we went to downtown Ottawa, we had a billboard with a picture of a pig, lounging in a trough of dollar bills, sipping a glass of champagne. We said, this is trough day, all these MPs are going to qualify for pensions. On the other day, we had a campaign called Operation Pork Chop, which we urged people to vote against MPs who are going to qualify for this pension. Chop the pork. And again, this media campaign was very successful. It was successful in the media, it was successful in the public, and again, it got people thinking about the bigger picture. It wasn't just MP pensions, so they were bad enough. It symbolized, red ink. It symbolized the abdication of leadership. It symbolized government arrogance. Okay, so there's examples of even using guerrilla warfare, going after weak points in the line and exploiting it. Okay, so now we'll go to point 2. And point 2 in my top 10 strategy list may be a little controversial. Point 2 is this. Forget everything you learned in political science class. Okay? Because nothing you learn in political science class is really relevant to guerrilla warfare fighting. Okay? Because what you learn in political science class is a lot of theories and ideas, lots of substance. Okay? In a guerrilla warfare campaign, substance and depth and complexity, that weighs you down. You don't want that. In a guerrilla warfare operation, what you want to do is you want to be concise, you want to be straightforward. Most of all, you want to be simple. Keep it simple and repeat it again and again. That's the secret. For example, in the mid-1990s, we were launching a media campaign against Bob Rae, who was at that time the Premier of Ontario. And our campaign was comprised basically of billboards, billboard campaign. And when you're talking about a billboard campaign, you can't be too complex. You got to get your message out 10 words or less. It's got to be simple. And one of the billboards we had, one of the most popular billboards we had, was very simple. It had a picture of a cat that was labeled mouse killer. Next to that was a picture of a fly swatter that said bug killer. And after that was a picture of Bob Rae that said job killer. Simple, effective way to get the message out. And that, by the way, that billboard was popular. We got media coverage not only in Ontario but across the country on that. In fact, an American magazine did a spread on that, on those billboards we were doing. Because it was an effective way to get the message. Keep it simple. By the way, this is a lesson we learned the hard way. Okay, I'll tell you a story. In the mid-1980s, Canada was really in a bad way fiscally speaking. Conservative government was, spending was out of control. They were racking up deficits of about $40 to $45 billion a year. We were going to hit the fiscal wall. So at the National Citizens Coalition, we said, we're going to do something about this. We're going to run a campaign to raise public awareness, to warn people about the dangers of all these deficits and debt and stuff. So we put together an ad campaign, newspaper ads, radio commercials, TV spots, and it had lots and lots of substance in it. Charts and graphs and sophisticated economic arguments and quotes from economists and all that kind of stuff. It was actually quite brilliant. And we decided to test market this campaign in a place called Dawson Creek, British Columbia, Dawson Creek, BC. And thereafter, I always referred to that campaign as the Dawson Creek Massacre. Because nobody cared. Nobody reacted to it at all. It was a dud, it was a flop, it was a catastrophe. Wasted a lot of money. We tried to figure out what went wrong. What did we do wrong? We did a survey, we did a poll, and we found out that people didn't understand the terms we were using. They didn't know what a deficit was. They didn't know what a debt was. They didn't know the difference between a deficit and a debt. They didn't really know, what $45 billion, what that really meant. So we were kind of speaking to them in a language they couldn't understand, right? And that's why the campaign didn't go anywhere. It wasn't really their fault, it was our fault. We weren't communicating with them. And so that's why we went back to the drawing board, and I came up with the idea of the tails and the tax drop. No charts, no graphs, just hundreds of examples of ridiculous, goofy waste. And why did it work? Because somebody who might not get mad at a $5 billion agricultural subsidy will get mad, at a $5,000 grant to the continuous garbage project. Something they can relate to. Okay? And that's what you want to do. You want to get them to relate to something. You got to keep it simple. And that leads me to point 3 of my top 10 strategy list. Point 3 might be a little controversial too. And it's this. Aim for the heart in a campaign. You have to aim for the heart. What does that mean? Well, it means in a guerrilla warfare campaign, you're not interested in addressing or appealing to a person's intellect. Okay? You want to appeal to their emotion. You don't want them to think, you want them to react. Okay? It's a lot easier to get somebody to react than it is to get them to think. You do that through emotional appeals. I mean, all advertising is actually based on emotional appeals, whether you're selling cars or toothpaste or aftershave lotion. It's all really about emotion. I mean, I buy the aftershave lotion I have not because the chemical components make it superior to its rivals, but because in the advertisement they said beautiful women would chase after me. Aftershave lotion. It's false advertising. It's false advertising. And the same in politics. You have to use emotion in politics. For example, just as a hypothetical example, if the government raised taxes, the intellectual way to complain about the heightened taxes would be to commission a study on how high taxes, hinder productivity. That's the intellectual approach. If I was doing it, I'd run a campaign saying, the government is increasing your taxes. You know why? Because the Prime Minister wants to buy a luxury jet so you can travel around the world in it. That's where your tax dollars are going. That's kind of a dopey example, simplified, but that's what I mean. You appeal to their emotions. Okay? That leads me to point 4. Point 4 on my top 10 strategy list. Point 4, this is probably controversial too, come to think of it. Point 4, too, is the two emotions you want to take advantage of are hate and fear. Okay? Sounds bad, I know, but hear me out. Poets might say love makes the world go around, but in politics, hate and fear actually make the world go around. Those are powerful, motivating emotions. If you want to get people to send you money, if you want people to call their MP, if you want them to take some kind of political action, you got to invoke those two emotions. Why is it like that? I don't know. Maybe it's something to do with primal base emotions of fight and flight or whatever. I don't know, but it works. I mean, that's why so-called negative advertising campaigns are so effective. Everybody says they don't like negative advertising campaigns, but they all use them. Why do they use them? They work. Why do they work? Because they appeal to hate and fear. Take the Liberal ads, 2004 federal election. They were designed to get people to fear Stephen Harper. Right? If you elect Stephen Harper Prime Minister, he'll send kittens to Iraq. If you elect Stephen Harper Prime Minister, he's going to build aircraft carriers so he can bomb abortion clinics. Right? These were all designed to get people to fear Stephen Harper. And you know what? They worked. They were very effective. Other examples, Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan's coalition. How did Ronald Reagan keep his coalition together? His hatred and fear of the Soviet Union and international communism. Okay? When the Soviet Union collapsed and international communism didn't seem to be such a threat, the Reagan coalition collapsed. Then Bill Clinton came in. Margaret Thatcher was successful because she capitalized on people's hate and fear of the militant socialism of the union bosses in the Marxist Labor Party. Okay? And at the NCC, I can tell you from my experience, our organization, or my former organization, has its membership base runs the whole gamut of conservative opinion. Social conservatives, evangelical Christians, libertarians, fiscal conservatives, neocons, populists, you name it, we have it in our group. And I can tell you from experience, it's impossible to get them all to love the same thing or all to like the same thing. But it's really, really easy to get them all hate the same thing or to fear the same thing. That's why you have to, if not use these emotions, at least take advantage of these emotions in any kind of guerrilla warfare campaign. That leads me to point 5. Point 5. And point 5 of my top 10 strategy lists this. You got to get a bad guy. Okay? You got to get a bad guy. Just as Star Wars needed Darth Vader to be a successful movie, any successful guerrilla warfare operation He needs a bad guy, you need a villain, you need a demon, you need a devil. You know, former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney understood this. He once said that the essential thing in politics is to have an enemy. And he's absolutely right. You need an enemy. Why do you need an enemy? A couple of reasons. First of all, remember I said hate and fear are important? It's hard to get people to hate and fear abstract objects or subjects or issues. Easier to get them to hate a person. Okay? Or because they can relate more to a person. They can fear a person. The second reason is that if you have a bad guy or a villain, if you're very, very lucky, the bad guy will attack you. That's what you want. Whenever we were designing a campaign at the NCC, I was always hoping the politician we were targeting would attack us. We used to call that spinning the politician. We wanted the politician to spin. And the best spinner, by the way, in Canadian politics for us, Sheila Copps. Sheila Copps. Whenever we attacked her in an ad or a news release, she would always rise to the bait. She'd get up in the House of Commons and denounce that evil right-wing group, the National Citizens Coalition. And I loved it when she did that. Why? Well, first of all, it gave us publicity. Right? The NCC attacking Sheila Copps, that wasn't necessarily a news story. But Sheila Copps reacting to our attack and going after us, hey, that's a news story. Right? Because that's conflict, that's drama. The media likes that. And they would call me, and I would say something, incendiary in return to what Copps said. And I would build a story. Then she would react to that, and the story would keep building on itself. Would keep getting free publicity. So that's why it's important to have a bad guy. The other thing about having a bad guy that's good is it helps give you credibility. Sheila Copps attacking us, it gives us credibility, because we must be important. We must be powerful for them to attack us. Otherwise, why would she attack us, right? And by the way, the secret about politicians is they know this. They know that they shouldn't. If they were smart, they would just ignore these kinds of attacks, but they can't help it because they're all egomaniacs. Right? So take advantage of that. Helps your credibility. And the last good thing about it is it helps mobilize your base. Right? If you get attacked by a villain, by a demon, you go back to your supporters and say, we weren't doing anything wrong, and all of a sudden Sheila Copps attacked us for no reason. Please help us. Please help us defend against this vicious attack. It's good mobilization technique. And bad guys are all over politics. They're a staple feature. In the United States, the Republican Party, who's their bad guy? For a long time it was Ted Kennedy, right? Whenever anything bad happened, it was always a Ted Kennedy style law. It helped us stop the Ted Kennedy education bill or whatever. Because he was a good villain for them. Now they're using Hillary Clinton more, and Michael Moore to a lesser extent has become a good villain for them. The Democrats had Newt Gingrich as a good villain. Whenever they wanted to attack the Republicans, they'd always invoke the name of Newt Gingrich. Here in Canada, the Liberals and the NDP have bad guys. But it's not Stephen Harper. Interestingly enough, Stephen Harper's not their bad guy. Who's their bad guy? Bush. George Bush. Exactly. Yeah. You ever notice when they go after Harper, they always say the George Bush clone, or George Bush-like policies, or he wants to be George Bush's lapdog. They do that because George Bush is a good villain for them. Helps mobilize their base, help them raise money, all that kind of stuff. So you got to get a villain. At the NCC we had lots of villains. Jean Chrétien was a good villain. Pierre Trudeau was a good villain. Just about any union boss you can name was a good villain for us. Our best villain, though, by far, Bob Rae. Bob Rae. Yeah. Our supporters absolutely detested Bob Rae. All I had to do was write his name on a blank piece of paper and mail it out to people, and they would send us money. That's why I was so sad when he actually lost that election. I was kind of hoping the Liberals would give us a leader. Anyway, having a villain is a good thing. And that leads me to point 6 of my top 10 strategy list. And point 6 is this. Make them laugh. Use a little bit of humor. Use a little bit of fun. Because one of the dangers of guerrilla warfare fighting, one of the dangers of using hate and fear and emotion and bad guys, is that you can look nasty. And you can look mean-spirited. And you can look bad. And that can undermine your message. That can undermine your message with the public and even with your own supporters. That's a really good thing. So if you use a little bit of humor, you can take the edge off the attack. In fact, you'd be amazed at what you can get away with a little bit of humor. Think back to our campaign I was talking about MP pensions. Okay, think about that. We were calling our MPs, our elected representatives, pigs. Okay, that's pretty nasty stuff. But because we did it in a fun way, with cartoon pigs and all that kind of stuff. We actually had a radio commercial where pigs were oinking to the Blue Danube. You know, oink, 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 oink. We called it the pension trough waltz. But because we did a little bit of humor with it, we had a little bit of fun with it, people accepted it. You know, they didn't get angry at us, they didn't hold it against us. It was a very popular campaign. Oh, we did get one complaint, okay, about our MP pension campaign from the Ontario Swine Breeders Association. They said the ad was unfair to pigs. That leads me to point 7. Point 7 is this. You have to win the war of the words. Okay? You have to define your issue or your cause before your opponents define it for you. Okay? This is very important. You know, take the abortion debate. You know, they understand this very well in the abortion debate. You know, people who are against abortion, they don't call themselves anti-abortionists. They call themselves pro-life. Because that's how they want to define the issue. It's a question of life. People who are in favor of legalized abortion, they don't call themselves pro-abortionists. They say we're pro-choice. That's how they want to define it. They want to define it as a choice for women. Okay? So they understand the importance of this kind of PR battle. And at the NCC, we knew the importance of it as well. We did a campaign, we fought years and years against certain election laws which infringed on freedom of expression, on freedom of speech. I mean, I think I talked about this last time I was at the Liberty Summer Seminar. These laws basically made it illegal, made it a crime for organizations like the National Citizens Coalition to run political advertising during elections. And we were going to oppose this law, and the first thing we did was we labeled it an election gag law, because we said the government was trying to gag Canadians. Okay? And the media picked up on it. The media began to call it an election gag law. And not just in editorials or in commentaries, but in straight news pieces. Today, the National Citizens Coalition announced they were taking the election gag law to court. So anybody hearing that story or reading that story would be more sympathetic towards us. Because who wants to be inside of a gag law? It doesn't sound very good. It sounds kind of sinister, right? We did the same thing with our MP pension campaign. We called it a gold-plated pension. This makes it sound rich, a gold-plated pension. Media picked up on that too. The public picked up on that. Everyone began calling it a gold-plated pension. After a while, I got to think that it actually was called a gold-plated pension. You know, there was an act in Parliament, you know, the Gold-Plated Pension Act of 1996. But that helped us win the PR war. Okay, so it's very important to win the war of words and define the issues before the other guy defines it for you, because they will. And that leads me to point 8. The point 8 is, don't be afraid of the media. Okay? I know a lot of libertarians and conservatives don't like the media. It's left-wing, it's biased, they're out to get us. And that might be true, but it's irrelevant. The fact is, if you want to get your news story out there, you got to use the media. If you want to get your message out, you got to use the media. And remember, media coverage is like free advertising. Okay? If you get a story in a newspaper or in a radio show or a TV show, that's like getting a free ad. And that's what you want. If you're a guerrilla warfare, usually dealing with a very small budget, you want to take as many free ads as you can get. In fact, it's better than a free ad. It's actually better than a free ad, because when you get media coverage, it's third-party disinterested source endorsing you. And that has a lot more credibility than if you just say something about yourself. You know, if there was a story in the Globe and Mail that said, the Liberty Summer Seminar is a key event for libertarians, okay, that would have a lot more impact than if Peter Jaworski ran an ad in the Globe and Mail that said, the Libertarian Summer Seminar is a key event. Because he'd just be saying that about himself, right? If a reporter saying that, it wouldn't be true. So, don't be afraid of the media. You have to use the media. How do you get media coverage? Well, you could give a whole speech on that and write books on that topic. But you know, some of the things you have to remember are get a list of people who are friendly to you. I mean, there are journalists and talk show hosts and columnists who are friendly to small C conservatives or to libertarians. Find out who they are, put them on a list, you know, send them out your ideas, your news releases, whatever. The second thing is you have to learn how to pitch a story. You know, you have to learn how to sell your story to the media. You have to learn how to persuade them that your story is sexy, it's interesting, you know, it's controversial, it's unique. There's something about it that makes it newsworthy. You have to learn how to do that. And the last thing you have to learn how to do is to do all the work for them. See, the more work you can do for a reporter in terms of giving good quotes and background and research and sources. If you provide them with a story which was almost done, they're more likely to use it because they're lazy. But there aren't any journalists here, are there? If there are journalists here, I'll just say this. They have tight deadline pressures. They haven't got a lot of time. So the more you provide them with some kind of sort of finished story, the more likely it is they'll use it. Oh, and by the way, excuse me, by the way, if you get a story somewhere, even if it's in the Orono Bugle or whatever it is here, send it out to your media list. Send it out to them because then you get the sort of the herd mentality going. If a journalist sees, oh, somebody in the Orono Bugle wrote a story on it, it must be news. Maybe I'll do something on it. So you get sort of a momentum going there. It's called the echo chamber effect. So don't be afraid of the media. Okay, part 9. Part 9 on my top 10 list. What is part 9? Oh yeah, part 9, I'm going to actually quote the real Che Guevara. And the real Che Guevara said the important thing to remember about guerrilla warfare was vigilance. Okay? Vigilance, and that's true for political guerrilla warfare as well. Be alert. Okay? What does that mean? Well, it means be alert to what's going on in the world, to what news stories are happening, what's making headlines. Because if there's something happening out there that can relate to your issue or your cause, then piggyback on it. Hitch a ride. Because reporters are always looking for sidebars or for different angles to a story. So why not provide that to them? For instance, in the late 1990s, union bosses in Ontario were spending like $1 million to defeat Mike Harris. It was a massive media campaign to defeat the Mike Harris Tories. It was making a lot of news, it was making a lot of headlines. So we took advantage of that and launched our own campaign in which we were opposing the fact that union bosses were using forced dues to subsidize this campaign. And we had a campaign called Stop the Forced Dues Blues. And what made that a news story was that the union had already done all the work of getting the media all riled up about the issue in the first place. So we took advantage of their hard work and sort of hitchhiked on what they were doing. So be alert to other stories to where you can relate what you're doing to some other news story. Okay? That's a sort of an effective, cheap way to get coverage. And that leads me, you'll be happy to know, to part 10, which is the last one. And part 10 is this. Beware of your allies. Okay? And when I say allies, I mean politicians. Okay? We need politicians. We need politicians to actually change the laws. We need politicians to make the kind of changes we think need to be made in this country. But that doesn't mean we should trust them. Okay? In fact, politicians make very unreliable allies. And there's reasons for that. First of all, people who go into politics do so because at least at some level they think government is part of the answer and not part of the problem. So that makes them somewhat unreliable. But the real problem with politicians is that there's a dynamic at work which gives them an incentive to betray their own base, to betray their own supporters. If you go to a politician and you say, you have my vote 100%, I'm not going to vote for anybody else but you. The politician might not look at you and say, oh, thank you, I'm very grateful. He'll think to himself, oh, I own that guy. I don't need him anymore. I got his vote. I own him. I'm going to try to get somebody else to vote for me. That's what's happening right now at the federal level with the Conservative Party. They're moving to the left. Why are they moving to the left? Because Prime Minister Stephen Harper and his advisors have calculated that Conservative voters have nowhere else to go. They own the Conservative vote. So now they're trying to get the Liberal vote. And they think the way to get the Liberal vote is by moving to the left. Okay, the Conservatives call this making compromises. Well, when it comes to principle, I don't believe in compromise. And I think we need organizations, libertarian, small C conservative organizations, that also don't believe in compromise. We need organizations like the Institute for Liberal Studies that stick to their principles, stick to their values, stick to their ideals. Because somebody has to keep pushing the politicians in the right direction. Somebody has to remind the politicians that principle is more important than power for the sake of power. And that's a guerrilla warfare operation. Fighting behind your own lines, keep your allies on the straight and narrow. Okay? So that's my top 10 strategy list. Some of my ideas might sound stupid, but there's a saying in the military that if it's stupid but works, it isn't stupid. And a lot of my ideas do work. They are effective. Now, let me add one postscript to that, and that is this. That I think the future of political guerrilla warfare has never been rosier. And I say that because of the emergence of the internet. Okay? The internet is going to be a marvelous tool, a marvelous weapon to launch who knows what kind of guerrilla warfare operations. It allows you to reach so many people at relatively little cost. Allows you to get around the mainstream media, allows you to get around the political establishment. It's going to be an amazing tool. So you're probably asking, well, Gerry, why didn't you include that in your top 10 list? And the answer is, I'm really too old to understand how this thing works. I mean, I don't even know how to download pornography.
That's odd.
But it will be an effective tool, and I think it's going to make guerrilla warfare, I think it's going to revolutionize not only guerrilla warfare, but just politics in general in this country. So internet or no internet, is guerrilla warfare going to change the country overnight? Is it going to usher in a libertarian revolution? The answer is no, it won't. But what it will do is it will undermine people's confidence in the state. It'll undermine people's confidence in politicians. It'll undermine people's confidence in big government. It'll get people thinking, maybe big government doesn't have all the answers. Or maybe there are alternatives to big government. And once you open that door just a little bit, okay, just a little bit, then you can use your big guns. Then you can use your intellectual arguments and your substance and all other stuff which I don't understand, right? Then the Fraser Institute, or Montreal Economic Institute, and the C.D. Howe Institute, and all these other organizations can come forward and say, yeah, there are alternatives to big government. There are ways to make government smaller. There are ways to lower your taxes. There are ways to promote your freedom. And maybe that will trigger a libertarian revolution or a change in this country. So I don't want to leave you with the idea that guerrilla warfare is the only way to fight for freedom. It's an effective way. It's the way I do it. But what's important is that we all fight for freedom in our own way, in what suits us best. The key is that we keep fighting. We keep the fight up. Let me end by quoting the Spartan king, Leonidas. Or, actually, let me quote Gerard Butler, who played Leonidas in the movie. At one part in the movie, Leonidas says, Spartans never surrender, Spartans never retreat. That has to be our motto, those of us who are fighting for freedom. We must never surrender, we must never retreat, and the last thing we must never do is speak too long. And that, I'll end my talk.
Questions?
Over here. Just a quick question. Does anybody know who sent the bottle of tequila to John Crosby?
I think that's a political mystery that remains unsolved.
I was here last year and I heard you speak for the first time. At that time I hadn't considered what you, something that you talked about, which is civil disobedience, and you introduced that into my realm of thinking. So I think I've progressed as an activist now.
Well, let me say that I never urge anybody to break the law. I would never do that.
I'll get that.
I think there are ways. I think we should all do what we can not to cooperate with the state. Lots of times I think people just cooperate so quickly and so meekly, and they give in so quickly to when the government does something. Like, for instance, when we lost the gag law in the Supreme Court of Canada, the court basically said the gag law was constitutional. And I remember I called up our president at the time, and Peter Coleman, and he said, "Oh, we better register. We're going to register now," because that was part of the provisions. You had to register with the government. And I said, "I don't want to register it." "Well, I think you should push the envelope on this thing." So what I did was, the federal election just been called, so I put together an ad that had a picture of Dalton McGuinty on it, and I said, the ad said, "Don't let the Liberals get away with it." Okay, and on the surface, that might seem to be breaking the election gag law because we're doing an advertising. But I would say, what are you talking about? We're talking about Dalton McGuinty. It has a picture of Dalton McGuinty. I can't help it if the federal Liberals and the provincial Liberals have the same name. And people get confused. That's not my fault. So that's an example of sort of pushing the envelope. And I think we should do that as much as possible, not cooperate with the government so much. Make it hard, make them work for their money, right?
I have a little bit of a question also. Since you mentioned that you were fired by the NCC, I'm curious what that's about.
Next question.
Gerry, you mentioned...
You're my Facebook friend.
Yes, one of many, I'm sure. But one thing we could do to... Okay. You mentioned about, say, if one of your stories shows up in a small town. I won't. But if one of your stories shows up in a small town newspaper, you might want to forward it to, say, National Post or Toronto Star. Because there's a herd mentality in effect. There could also be a an aspect of jealousy amongst the media personnel, or competition. Like if one of those small town papers are publishing this, are reporting on this, we gotta keep up with them.
Yeah, there's always a competition, to get the scoop, to get the story before somebody else. You have to learn how to play the games with some reporters. Like sometimes you have to make a call. Like I had a story once which we were going to do a campaign against the Liberal leader, Ernie Eves, and we're going to do some kind of campaign against him. And the guy in the National Post said, give me an exclusive on this. And I said okay. And in exchange for getting exclusive, got a huge story in the National Post, get us a lot of publicity, which was good. The drawback is nobody else from anybody else talked to me for a year after that from the Sun or the Star. So you have to, these are the kind of tactical decisions you have to make, and sometimes they're tough calls. And by the way, don't be afraid to be too silly when you're talking about the media. I mean, I once did a story called Top 10 Government Turkeys. It was before Thanksgiving. I was sort of saying what I thought were the top 10 government turkeys. It was really silly. But I got about 10 or 9 radio interviews on that, okay? Just because they thought it was funny and it was silly and it was different. So, don't be afraid to do things a little bit differently to get media attention, especially if you have a low budget and stuff. If you come up with something different that nobody else is talking about, that's a good way to get media coverage.
Do you have any more questions? Okay, we'll have Matt introduce the next speaker.